for being here. Thank you to our guest speakers. Thank you to Stephen Rogers for letting us use this beautiful space. Really excited about it. He's going to talk to you about it a little later. The last time we did a Women Speak was right before COVID. Me, Lisa D, my daughter Meleika. You know, Michelle Obama says, do something. I'm always trying to do something. If you know me, I'm always trying to do something and trying to do something with other people and collaborate and make things happen. So my slogan is, women have something to say, they have something to do, and they have something to be. And we're in a very challenging time period for women these days. And I just want to say an example of how important it is to be conscious these days about being a female. So a week or two ago, a 29-year-old young white mother had a pregnancy that was tubular. And it could have been resolved, and she could be alive today, but she's not, because she was in one of those states where they won't touch you if you're in trouble with a pregnancy. And that's real. I can tell a lot of other stories, but that one's real, and that was the outcome. And everybody's got a mother, sister, daughter, friend, aunt that could find themselves in that situation. And we need to think about that when we go to the voting booth. When we did this before, we had a really good lineup too, and we have a good lineup tonight of really professional speakers that are doing really good stuff. And I'm so excited about it tonight to have them here. And there's lots of other women who also have something to say and do and be. And we look forward to be able to continue this process so more women can speak when it's needed, because we really need all the support we can get. And the other thing about women, sometimes we reach out or try to imitate what we think is power in terms of what a man reflects as power, but we have our own power, and it can be developed, it can be organized, it can be building something. We want to collaborate with each other. This piece that I did is Women Unite, Stand for Children. Instead of us being casualties of war, we need to think about that. If people really think about innocent women and children being killed over territorial wars and needs for, wealth, we'll say, I just want people to think about what it really means. And so the context of this is say something, do something, be something. And all the women speaking tonight will tell you what they are saying, what they are doing, and what they are being as women in 2024. And it's important. I would like to say personally, because I am a life coach, that I feel we need to protect our hope space. That's your heart. Protect that. Be careful what you let in, because you need that hope space for later whenever times get to be challenging. Also, you need to feed your spirit. So things that feed your spirit, do a lot of that, because the spirit will last long beyond what the body goes through. So that is my advice as a female to the women in this room and women all over the world, because that's what has to happen for us to change this world to a better place and look out for ourselves, look out for our children, look out for our men, look out for our communities, and be able to stand up and do something and be real about it and authentic about it. And one of the things in staying conscious is also important. Now, one of the things that I'm also doing new as of this month is starting a North Shore Black Artist Group. And you'll hear more about that later as time goes by. You will have time to talk to the speakers after the end of the show. So we want networking to take place downstairs. So I'm going to turn things over to Lisa D, because that's really my point that I wanted to make, and why this Women's Speak event exists in the first place, and how important it is, especially this year. So thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say.
Just a little information about this church. Behind this church is a parking lot. And in 1927, that parking lot was where 5 black families owned homes. It was a street back there by the name of Bauer Place, B-A-U-E-R. And in 1927, a white developer said, I want that land to build homes for white people. So, with the support of the city of Evanston, those black families were forced to pick their homes up and move them over by the high school. They were not given any kind of compensation for that mistreatment, inhumanity. And the white developer never built those homes. In 1932, this church was built. The denomination, they had nothing to do with what happened to those black families. So in 1932, this church was built, and I learned about this story about those black families in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. One of the descendants of one of the families that was forced to move, he was given an interview. His name is Isaac Sutton. Many of you probably know him here in Evanston. And Isaac was telling the story to Gaynor Hall from WGN. He was telling the story about how his grandparents were forced to move their home from Bauer Place to over by the high school. And the reality was that was a great example of wealth being taken from a black family. And it was 5 black families that were forced to move, and I heard about it in 2020, and on December 28th, 2022, I purchased the church. My intent was, thank you very much. I had first asked if I could just simply buy the parking lot where the crime had been committed, and I was told no. So after being told no, I said, well, I'll just buy the entire church. And so I bought the church, and people said, what are you going to do with the church? And oftentimes when people hear that I own a church, they say, what, you moved from being, I'm a retired professor, you moved from being a professor to now being a preacher? And I said, well, my mother would be really happy to hear that, if she was still alive, because that's what she always wanted. But I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I want to do something that honors those black families that were forced to move. And I want to make this church something that has meaning to the black community in Evanston, the black community in Chicagoland, and the black community nationally, as well as any other group that has an interest in using the church. So with that, I've made the church available to any not-for-profit organization that wants to use it for an event. They use it for free. We have, since I've owned it, we host a monthly jazz concert here, led by Donovan Mixon, an Evanstonian who brings his friends from Chicago. And so we have a free jazz concert here every month. There was a fundraiser for the concert, for the Evanston NAACP in February that was outstanding. We also hosted around this time last year at Fisk University Choir, Sherman United Methodist Church. They normally host Fisk. They reached out to me, said, can we do it at this church because the auditorium is larger. This has a seating capacity of 235 seats. I said, absolutely, sure, absolutely. And so they hosted the event here. It was standing room only. It was 300 people here. It only seats 235, and the windows were literally sweating. And then I also give it to the Black Women of Evanston. They host a monthly workshop, wellness and health workshop downstairs. And I don't call it the basement because there are windows, as you can see. I like to call it the lower level or the garden area. And so when Fran reached out to me and asked me, could she host an event here, my immediately answer was yes, absolutely, and it was a joy for me to be able to say that. Therefore, I would like to close by welcoming you to this event, welcoming you to this beautiful church, as well as I want to close by making you aware of something, and that is, if you go out into the parking lot, you'll see 5 spaces out there, and those 5 spaces are numbered. And those numbers on those 5 spaces are the addresses of the Black families that were forced to move in 1927. Have a great evening. Thank you all for coming.
I really am very excited about being here with all of you. This is a very, very significant and special time in the history of our country. And I believe that women are going to save the world. I really do. I really do. And I'm looking out at beautiful women and powerful women, and I want to ask you a favor. I want you to take your hands and fists and put them over your head and be as strong as you can. I want you to feel the power. Thank you. You know, there are entertainers and all kinds of artists will often begin with that kind of motion because you really do feel more powerful, and we need this moment of great power. So this is a fraught moment in history, and I think the choices in this election, and I'm not going to get too political, but I really do think it's a matter of fascism or freedom. It's really that simple right now. And so all of us need to make a decision to do something. That's something that we heard at the convention when Michelle Obama said, do something. And to think about what that do is. Right now, I've been organizing people to go to Michigan and Wisconsin and just knock on doors. Elections are not rocket science. It's not that hard to do the things that really need to be done. There are opportunities to do phone banking. There are opportunities to write letters, handwritten letters that people can receive about the election. But what's at stake? What's on the ballot right now? The things that are most precious to us. Women's rights. You know, for many years, for many decades since the beginning of this country, the changes that were made were in the direction of more freedom. More freedom. It is only of late that the Supreme Court and legislation that has actually removed rights, especially for women. You know, I was alive pre-Roe v. Wade. I was in college. I remember the fright of some of my girlfriends. And then the Supreme Court made a decision that took that fear away. And I'll never forget the day I was walking through the Capitol when the announcement was made that Roe v. Wade had been overturned. It was, you know, I'm sure some of you remember where you were on certain major occasions or happenings in the world. This is one of them for me. And I thought, is it possible that I now live in a world where my children and grandchildren will not have the rights that I have had. And so we have to get ourselves together and make the decision to fight. When we fight, we win. When we fight, we win. We don't have a choice here. And so I really want to encourage each and every one of you to take some ownership, because this is not the job of a member of Congress. It is not the job of a candidate for president or for vice president. It is the job of the American people to decide to triumph, to know our own power, to make a decision, to make a change. Now, we are getting very close right now to the election that is most meaningful. Even my friend B. Lumpkin, you probably haven't heard about her, but she's 106 years old. You should see her. She goes to meetings, she stands up, she sits down, she dances at her parties. It's remarkable. But she's been alive for a long time and has been through a lot, but now agrees that now more than ever, our rights, our Constitution, our country is at stake. So this is supposed to be a time of inspiration, and I hope you will find it in yourself. What is the thing? What is the time? What is the work that I can do that can make a difference? As I said, this is not rocket science. This is not meaning you have to give up your life. It doesn't mean you have to learn every single thing about what's on the ballot. It just means that we get out every person we know to vote. I've been involved in elections that are won and lost by as few as 3 people. There was an important race a couple years ago in one of our neighboring states where a wonderful woman who was running lost by 3 votes. And, she went to visit some people and they said to her, "Oh, Catherine, when's the election?" It's like, it was. You missed it. You could have voted for me and it would have been over. So I want you to make a personal decision with you, and perhaps I hope your family too. However busy you are, there's going to be some time. However old or young you are, there is something for each of us to do. I just recently turned 80. I'm spending a lot of time going to Wisconsin and Michigan and doing what I think is the funnest thing there is to do, to knock on doors and just have a conversation with people and say, I certainly hope that you're going to go out to vote. I mentioned then my favorite candidate, which I'm not going to do now, but you may know. And so I hope you'll make that kind of decision, because we are powerful. The voice of women is louder, I believe, than it has ever been heard. On the ballot in 10 states, there is on the ballot, in addition to the election, there is the opportunity to vote for women's reproductive rights. In Florida, I am feeling optimistic because they got more than 1 million signatures to put that on the ballot. So it's this close now. Every day, the time is running down, but the time for each of us to do something is right here this minute. So think about it, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lisa D. This is my first time meeting you, and you're amazing. And Fran, I met Years ago, I remember being captivated by her work. There was this mystique about her portraits that drew me in. And I remember at one of her art shows, she actually donated some of her paintings to a few of us at Garrett Seminary. Voting rights activist Stacey Abrams was one of the first paintings to go, and eventually 2 remained. Oprah Winfrey, which had the year 2020 and a question mark at the bottom because there was talk of her running for president, which she later declined. And the other was of Senator Kamala Harris. And I said, well, I don't know much about the senator, and I've always admired Oprah, so I'll take Oprah. Little did I know that Vice President Kamala would be running for president of the United States so many years later. Yes. And I mean, I'm happy with my choice, but I wish I had the foresight and the optimism to see what was coming down the line. I will say of Fran that she is not only an artist, but a prophetic artist speaking truth to power. She will hang the truth on the wall and encourage us to think about what's going on in the world and how we can make a difference. My topic tonight is find your stream and swim in it, being authentic in challenging times. My daughter came home from out of state a couple of months ago, and she was obsessed with a quote from Vice President Kamala, which really struck a chord with young people, so much so that it went viral. Memes and little songs were everywhere. And it was Kamala quoting her mother saying, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree? And then came the explanation. You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you. And I imagine this statement went viral because it was a reminder to young people and so many of us that we come from something, right? We are the products of our ancestors' dreams. We didn't just appear out of nowhere without connection to our historical context. We, as women, come from a long lineage of ancestors who fought against inequality and oppression and suppression. We vote because of the women's suffrage movement and the Susan B. Anthonys of the world, because of the civil rights movement and the women behind the scenes like Fannie Mae Hamer and Diane Nash and Septima Clark. In Evanston, we have reparations because we know our history and we honor those who came before us. We swim in the stream that belongs to us and we try to continue the tradition of living better, doing better, and paving the way for the next generation. We have the 5th Ward School in the works because we know that it is the right thing to do, given our history and the need for children to have a quality education in their vicinity without having to be bused to other schools. I am a native of Evanston, grew up on the west side near Dodge and Oakton, and and while this is, without a doubt, a great place to live and raise your children, it can sometimes be challenging to find your stream. Everyone has a thing, and during my time here, everyone had a club or an organization to call home, and I didn't quite fit in with the socialites or the church folks or the academics or the journalists, and I didn't quite have the edge to be a social activist out there making things happen, so I began to wonder, how do I find my stream? I went to talk to teachers and professors and just mentors and relatives over the years, and they all said the same sort of things. Don't worry. You just haven't found your tribe. You haven't found your people. You haven't found your stream yet. And then I'd ask, well, how do I do that? And again, they all gave similar answers. They said, the more you are brave enough and courageous enough to be authentically you, the more your people will come. And so I stopped feeling a certain kind of way because I didn't fit a mold that people thought I should fit or that I wanted to fit. And I moved in a direction that brought me peace and affirmation, and that is writing. And not just writing, right? But I began to record history, my context, and all that I came from through the lens and the rhythms that I was given as an African-American middle-class woman who is Christian. I grew up reading novelists like Toni Morrison and Terry McMillan and Alice Walker and Tina McElroy Ansa, and poets like Gwendolyn Brooks and June Jordan and Nikki Giovanni. These women were home to me. Aside from the external factors of life, these women, through their art, told me as a teenager that I was beautiful and my waters of worth run deep, flowing from the African shores. Through their work, I learned that I am made with this sort of built-in resiliency that helps me overcome a society that will do all it can to keep you from being powerful beyond measure, as Marianne Williamson once penned. These women taught me if you can't find your stream, you had better create your own and blaze a trail for others so that they can push forward past those who try to turn back the hands of time and pretend that the sacrifices made and the lives lost on our behalf were a figment of our imagination. These women taught me about being a Black woman. It meant I had a certain measure of wisdom that I could tap into, a quadrilateral, as the United Methodists like to say, based on reason and tradition and experience and scripture. When trouble comes your way, you had better know how to swim through the narrow channels of life, and sometimes all you have to rely on are tradition, scripture, reason, and experience. Tradition, what happened in the past? How did they make it over? How can we learn from them and do better? Reason, does it make sense? Is it worth the risk? Experience, how has your life experience informed your current situation? What have the experiences of others taught you, taught us? And finally, scripture. What is God speaking to your heart as you read the sacred text of your religion or recall a meaningful experience in seasons of your past? Where is God in your journey? Dr. Emil Towns, president of the Society of Christian Ethicists, speaks on a womanist dancing mind, a term coined from Toni Morrison. It could easily be coined the artist or the writer's dancing mind. Dr. Towns writes, the womanist dancing mind is more than our attempt to make sense of the worlds surrounding us, sometimes enveloping us, sometimes smothering us, sometimes holding us, sometimes birthing us. It is more than our desire to reconfigure the world in our own images and then invite others to come and inspect the textures, the colors, the patterns, the shapes, the sizes of this new order and this new set of premises. No, the womanist dancing mind is the one that comes from a particular community of communities yearning for our common fire, banked by the billows of justice and hope. Our task is to explore the twists and turns of the community from which we spring and have our very life and breath, end quote. So I decided that my stream is a narrative story. Amidst my times of ministry and working with students, mothering and daughtering, niecing, I wrote a novel. Fully fiction, but the voices are those of my mother's sisters who hail from the Mississippi to Evanston as part of the Great Migration that took place between 1910 and 1970. The framework is that of my father, whose mother didn't feel quite equipped to be a mother of 5 children, so she walked away and left the children to family near and far to raise them. I began to wonder, what if I write a narrative where the mother returns? What if there are deeper reasons why a mother would leave her children? What if we let God get in the middle of things and sprinkle a little love and a little tenderness into the situation through the voices of these Southern women? Through the daughters, you'll see the scenes that echo my experience of growing up in Evanston, as well as my time working with youth in Chicago's South Side. The story is based in the late 1980s when we all compared our lives to the Cosby Show. And life was a little simpler without cell phones and the like. The publishers are the ones who decided to call it, and aptly so, This Ain't No Promised Land. It took 16 years to get published through a traditional publisher. Many publishers asked for rewrites, which involved bleaching or whitewashing, if you will, only to deny it in the end. Mainstream folks said it was too Christian, and Christians said it was too secular. And some wanted it to be a young adult book, and others wanted women's fiction. Finally, after years of waiting and rewriting, my agent found a publisher consisting of mostly women who resonated with the story and understood the bond between mothers and daughters. They grew up in the 1980s, one of whom used to travel to Chicago's South Side in the summers with her father. They loved the story and only wanted to help improve it and make it more marketable. So I found my stream, small as it was. It was made for me and all that I am. And yes, I could have self-published, but I believe there was a place in the traditional publishing industry, and there was a place for me. And as I was opening doors, we as Black, Indigenous people of color, as we continue to open doors and push these doors of wanting and being published, the more we open doors for our stories to be heard. And as we move into November and 2025, it feels like we are part of a big wave, a push for women going further than we've ever gone before, shattering the glass ceiling, pushing boundaries, fighting for equality, fighting for equity, even though there are those who would like us to fall back and shrink away. We are called to keep moving forward, upstream if need be, letting everything else flow past and around us. This is who we are, and this is exactly what we are made to do. We did not fall out of a coconut tree.
Having me. I'm Kim Bijou. I joined the Mitchell Museum of the American Indian in 2021. So I'm just now this week at my 3rd anniversary there. And I want to thank Meleika and Joy. They were the first people that reached out to me. I had worked my entire career with tribes in the public health and education arena. Had never worked in a museum, was fairly new to the area, so I really appreciate them reaching out. I'm glad we're back here, full circle, having the chance to talk to you about the way we've shaped the museum to represent how Native women are valued, and a little more about how that's impacted contemporary Native women today. So, how many of you have been to the Mitchell Museum? Oh. Okay. So we had this joke for about a year. People would come in and say, like, oh, I didn't know what this building was, and they had lived in the neighborhood the whole time. So that's lessening and lessening, hoping to get more people in. So I want to talk a little bit about the museum. It was established in 1977, and until 2021 had not had any Native leadership or staff or board members consistently over time. I'm the first permanent Native director at the museum. And so we've really prioritized representation in the museum. And so in early 2022, we became a majority Indigenous organization, with our leadership, staff, and board. And we are also a women-led organization. 4 of the 6 of our staff are Native women, and 7 of 11 of our board members are also Native women. And this wasn't like, we talk about it all the time. It wasn't like a conscious decision. It's just that Native women are so prominent in leadership in our communities. It just sort of happens. We have one straight male on our team, and he gets teased constantly. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the role of Indigenous women. I'm going to reference my community. I'm a citizen of the Oneida Nation, part of the Iroquois or Haudenosaunee Confederacy, where it is a matrilineal society, meaning that all of your family, your clan, your role all goes aligned with your maternal side. So it has a big influence on daily life. And looking back at this, I always think about this in the way that women's roles in the past few years have been reduced or eliminated so much. I am hopeful that people can learn from Indigenous cultures in the way that women are valued. So in the Indigenous worldview, there is no hierarchy among the natural world. So all living things, anything on Earth is at an equal level. When you look at the Western worldview, everything on Earth exists to serve, as they would say, man. But it's very contrary to the Western view. Women in Indigenous societies are equal to men. Many of the Great Lakes tribes that are, here around the Chicago area and surrounding states, including the Haudenosaunee, women hold an elevated and protected status as life givers. Women are leaders, and they are responsible for the well-being and peace in our communities. The Haudenosaunee nations, they span from Wisconsin all the way into Ontario and Quebec. Oneida, Seneca, Onondaga, they're also referred to as the Sick Nations. They are still governed by a system that has clan mothers. So the clan mothers are appointed. They're usually appointed based on their wisdom and their leadership skills. And they have the authority to, and it's been this way throughout history, they have the authority to select, advise, and remove the chief or the president, which meaning the elected officials. Yeah. It's great. And as more tribal nations are developing their own court systems, these, Council of Women are also being sought to determine the punishments, particularly in issues where there is violence against women. So, very interesting. So, wanted to talk a little bit about the erasure of Indigenous women in history. So, okay. I'm not sure how many people know, but the Founding Fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, modeled it after the Haudenosaunee form of governance. And so you'll see if you go to Philadelphia, if you looked at pictures of paintings of the Founding Fathers, there's like a few Iroquois men like overlooking the Founding Fathers, and they gave them guidance. What they left out was that there were women there guiding them on this process. Even worse, the Founding Fathers completely left out, when they say it's modeled after the Haudenosaunee governance, they completely left out the role of women in the Constitution. sense, this is like further reflected in the way that Indigenous women's roles have been either reduced or not acknowledged at all. And we see that, looking at this picture here, we have, representations of women like Pocahontas and Sacagawea. In this area, we have Kitty Howard and Archange Chevalier Wilmette. Their roles are reduced or romanticized. We usually hear about them as guides or translators, and they were far more than that. So Evanston is on the historical lands of Archange Chevalier Wilmette, which is named after her. It was her reservation. The land that the museum sits on belonged to her at one time, and she was pushed out. We always hear about her as a translator, and we know she was far more than that. She was an entrepreneur, she was a farmer, she was a mother to many children. She was a diplomat, she was multilingual, so she was navigating between all of these cultures that were here under, terrible conditions. And then Kitty Howard is always referred to as Jean-Baptiste de Sauvel's wife, or the First Lady of Chicago, which, it can't be possible because Chicago existed before it was claimed to be founded. So we are working on incorporating their stories into the museum and into a mural coming next year. Sharing a little bit about Indigenous women in Chicago today, they still play prominent roles, and there are 18 organizations in Chicago that make up the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative. And I love this fact, 17 of those 18 organizations are led by Indigenous women. So we are all and still, very strong support of us. Like right now, we're really proud. Mary Smith, who's Cherokee, is the president of the American Bar Association. I could go on, but we have some really, really strong, very supportive Native women in this region. And that is because of our cultures who value value and expect their roles in leadership. So just touching on a little bit of the impact of what it's like to live in both worlds, where in your own community you're valued, you have high expectations, and then you're in kind of the mainstream society where you are devalued or you are expected to have more of a traditional role. The other thing that Native women face is having to be over-sexualized or minimized. So this has created a lot of problems. So Native women and their original roles and protections and the concept of safety have deteriorated over 5 centuries because of colonial laws and policy. And so you'll see that reflected in the current spectrum of violence against women, which has created this crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I wasn't going to touch on that, but we have an exhibit at it at the museum that is leaving in January, and I hope that it's called No Rest, the Epidemic of Stolen Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirits. So I wanted to get it on everybody's radar before it leaves in January. It's 35 original works by 12 Indigenous artists, all who have been personally impacted by the epidemic. And the reason why talking about, the impact of existing in both worlds is because almost 95% of Indigenous women who are victimized or murdered are done so by non-Native men. And tribal nations, up until about a year ago, did not have the authority to prosecute any crimes on their reservation against those women. So non-Native man could come there, rape somebody, kidnap them, and the tribe had no authority to prosecute. There are laws in place to remedy that, but the tribes need to have a court system in place and, legal codes and attorneys and judges there in place, and that all of that takes time, so these things keep persisting. And there are many contributing factors to that, and that's, the big glaring one is erasure and invisibility of Indigenous women. There's a lack of data collection. For example, Cook County in their public health department does not have a box where you can check American Indian, Alaska Native. Same thing goes for crime records. So when we talk about like 95% of women or 85% of Native women who have been victimized, it's probably much, much, much larger than that. It's just that we don't have any data because it's not collected. And then there's all kinds of issues with jurisdictional issues. For example, the reservation that my family is from is about 4 hours from here. And if a federal crime happens on the reservation, like right now we have about 8 missing people, they have to wait for the FBI to come from Chicago or Milwaukee. And by that time, whoever has committed that crime can vanish. So there's a lot that needs to be fixed at the state and federal level, but there's also a lot that we can do as, just public citizens and share out if you know that somebody is missing or you're aware, help spread the word, call out the media for not covering, these cases, and help with the overall awareness of the issue. So moving on from that, this exhibit leaves in January, and we will be incorporating the positive and the grassroots movement that has come out of this, and that is because the strength of Indigenous women and the value that they have in their communities has grown into this major, major grassroots movement, and we'll be covering all of the great things that are coming out of that. We also have a huge garden expansion, and that garden will talk about Native women's roles as life givers, seed keepers, and like the caretakers of our land. So we're hoping to share our value and respect for Indigenous women, and hope everyone can learn. Thank you.
My name is Laurice Bell. I am sadly not a native Evanstonian, but I pretend to be one daily. I was born on the south side and moved to Evanston when I was 6 years old after my mother passed away in 1968. So what was a year of turmoil for many was quite a year of turmoil for me. I want to go back and thank Steve Rogers for having us here. Steve talked about the Sutton family being on Bower Place. And I want to bring up one other thing. Recently, through my podcast, Evanston Rules, with Ron Whitmore, who's here as well, who's my partner in the podcast, we did a project with Northlight Theater, and we recorded people's stories about their memories of community hospitals, some who were there, some who had family members, Dr. Penn's daughter, many people involved. We had Carlos Sutton, and we spoke to Carlos, and Carlos said something to me that I thought was quite interesting, and he said it to us, actually. And he was talking about when the houses were either torn down or moved to the Fifth Ward. And what he said is, in the South, they say you can get close but not too high. And here, in the North, they say you can get high but not too close. Hence the tearing down of these properties that they didn't build, which I don't know that Joni Mitchell meant this, but they paved Paradise and they put up a parking lot. They had no intention of building anything there. They just did not want black people over here. I can't say that I think they still do. But another point I'd like to bring up is when Steve's church was mentioned, this is what, when I speak about community, it's like, whose community are we speaking about? Because certainly I knew that Steve's church was here, and I've known for a while the work that he's been doing. And so for me, and for many in our community, we know about the church, we know about what he's building. And so I think that some of that has to do with how we expand our communities, who we speak to, who we reach out to. When we say things like we've reached out to the community, what does that mean? What does that look like? And so I think it's important that we redefine what that means. Recently, I became part of a project that was the women's mural that was unveiled a couple of weeks ago. It was the Evanston History Center, it was Art Encounter, and Shorefront got to be a part of it. When I received the list of the names, it was a limited list. It was white names and some black names, and no one else was included. Now, I could say I collect Black history, so we had a lot of our names, but we still didn't have a lot of our names. And if we are going to do the right thing, then we need to be more expansive in terms of who we're including. And when we talk about women, when we talk about feminism, when we talk about womanism, that is not just Black women and white women. That is all women. I reached out to Kim at the Mitchell. We reached out to a number of other people in the community, and we talked to people about, and by the way, we've got Fran Joy on that mural wall because of all that she's done. We've got Kim Vigue on that mural wall because all she's done. Jan Schakowsky, who just left, I'm gonna call her Fran, that's awesome. Jan Schakowsky, who just left, is on that wall. We have a number of people in this audience who have family members who are on that wall. But what we needed to do was we needed to reach out to other communities, the Latina community, the Muslim community, the queer community. We needed to reach out to the Asian community. And those communities needed to determine who was going to be on that wall. I was asked, well, how do we know what people have done? And I said, it's not yours to figure out. Nobody has been gatekeeping the communities that have been listed on all these walls for many years, and now is not the time to start gatekeeping others as we bring them in. I am not as prepared as the pastor, and nobody should have to follow you, I don't think. But I want to say that I grew up here. I grew up seeing a lot of things. Oh, wait, I forgot some of my notes. They're over here, forgive me. Thank you. I grew up seeing especially Black girls not getting the same rights, the same attention, the same care, the same thoughts in school, the same opportunities. In fact, opportunities wasn't really a word, maybe opportunity. And if things didn't quite go right, the opportunities weren't there as they were for many others. And this is in Evanston, our Evanston that we call this wonderful space, and it is in many ways a wonderful space. So when I speak in this way, it's not because I don't love Evanston. I want to paraphrase James Baldwin, who said that he loved America so much that he felt it important to criticize what he loved every day. And I feel that way about Evanston. I feel that way about every place that we stand in. So as a woman, I'm living in an era where we're all watching the rights we have fought for so many generations not so slowly be rolled back. And as a Black woman, I'm particularly worried. New York Times journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, who headed up the 1619 Project, recently wrote an essay that has unleashed a bit of tumult. Ms. Jones is no stranger to putting truths that have not been spoken into public discourse. And as she wrote about what we are seeing today, she talked about our history of slavery, institutional racism, and the ramifications of both today. She said, in order to address the disadvantages that Black Americans face, do we ignore race to eliminate its power, or do we consciously use race to undo its harms? Affirmative action and other racial justice programs were born of that era, but now, once again, we are in a period of retrenchment and backlash that threatens the stability of our nation. End quote. It is no surprise to me that it takes a strong woman to frame the stakes of the issues we all face today. And nowhere more than Evanston do we grasp the racial injustice cannot be and just remain a subject that we brush under the table. There must be atonement. I don't have to tell you that there is only one city in the nation that has actually undertaken and followed through on paying people reparations, right? And by the way, I don't know that I believe that's something to applaud, because I think it's outrageous that there is still only one city in the United States. I mean, I'm glad that we can applaud, but there's a lot more that we need to do. This $25,000 is a mediocre apology, but what I believe it will do is it will allow us to be the first, so that Amherst can then crawl, so that Oakland can then walk, so that Berkeley can then run. And that is how we have to view it, I believe. I believe that, you know, the historical mistakes must be recognized, talked about, and atoned for and understood in Evanston. The reparations program in this city is something we should all be proud of, and even more so because it is not just something we have done, it's a process we have undertaken. It is an ongoing movement to find a way through one of the country's most difficult issues. I heard Kamala Harris speak, and we're quoting Kamala tonight. I heard her speak, and she talked about how we get tired. We say we're tired. I want to say, who isn't tired? But we get tired, and then we stop, and we don't keep the momentum going. And she said that her grandmother said it was like brushing your teeth. You needed to brush your teeth every day to keep your teeth. You needed to eat every day to keep your strength. You needed to shower every day. You needed to exercise every day. And that's how we have to treat our rights. We have to treat them with care every day as we get up, as we breathe, as we walk, as we talk. I'm talking about women's rights. I'm talking about rights for Black people. I'm talking about rights for others that really are disappearing. Shorefront was really proud to be part of the reparations process. Dino Robinson, who founded Shorefront and who saw something and acted on it when nobody else was doing so, right? When Dino Robinson went to a local history center and was told that Black people hadn't really done anything integral to the build of Evanston, he was, say it again. What was that? Do it again. Right, there you go. He was shown 3 file folders marked coloreds in the year of 1995. Now, my issue isn't even that it was marked coloreds, because in a period of time, that is what we called ourselves. When I was a child, I was a colored child in the 60s. It's simply that because you don't have the right people handling who you are and your history, they mislabel you and they don't update to speak of who I am today. And that is why I think reparations is necessary. That is why I will take it one step further and speak about repatriation. I think about the importance in our community of recognizing who has done what and how we have done it. Recently at Shorefront, we had a program this summer where we had 2 interns do work where they interviewed people who were either worked in people's homes as domestics or family members who had mothers, typically, who worked in people's homes. It's a subject that's a tough subject because no one wants to recognize the work that these mostly women did to build our country. Not just our community, but our country. Free slave labor, we could never be who we are without that. And yet we had women going into homes, loving those children, loving their families, cooking for their families, building for their families. And very often, then being let go when they were no longer needed. Leaving children they loved, being left and having the children, who loved them, not knowing what's going on. They worked for families so that other people could do everything else, right? So when we think about people who could go and do those marches, people who could go to work, people who could go to lunch, who was in the home building that home and not getting a 401k and not getting any of the benefits that anyone else got and leaving with nothing. But often the clothes on their back, right? Maybe they were invited again for Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe they were invited for Christmas dinner. Maybe it was to work. Maybe it was to sit in the kitchen. Maybe it was to come sit at the table. But when I think about all that women have done, Black women have done, I think of my mother, and I stand here as the daughter of Adrienne Rowena Van Zandt. I stand here as the granddaughter of Darlene Hill Van Zandt. And I know that they didn't have the opportunities that I have. I know that that is why I stand here. That is why I do the work I do to collect the histories that are so key and so important and so necessary. We have a reparations project that we worked on as well. Shore Fund is known in many ways for reparations, but that is just a piece of it, and that was just because of what we collected. We collect the joys in our lives as well. We collect all of the spirits that have come through. People say, you're in that space alone, isn't it lonely? And I say, each box I open surrounds me with my ancestors. So it is for me a space where I feel at peace and I feel surrounded by just brilliance. We did a reparations project where we had students, high school students, pair up with recipients of reparations. What it looked like was an 8-week program where we had people speak. We had Cheryl Corley from NPR. We had Robin Ruth Simmons. We had Keith Beauchamp, who wrote and produced the movie Till. We had a historian, Cheryl Johnson Odom. And they all spoke to these kids about what it looks like to come into a space and interview people. And some of that was cultural. You don't walk into a space and I wouldn't say, hi, Audrey. I would say, hello, Miss Moy. Those are some of the things that are important when you go into other communities and other cultures. It's not just to walk in and just start talking and to be who you are. It is to get to know where you are. What happened is the adults, the elders were just going to come for the first session and then they were going to leave and come back at the end when they were going to be interviewed. They loved it so much they kept coming back. The intergenerational piece of communities also, it's not just about race, it's not just about gender, it's also, there's age, right? We hire all these young interns and we're so excited and it's so important to do it. But what I've realized in this city of Evanston is that we talk so often to our elders. We go to them for all of the information and they have been in articles on TV shows and they've not been compensated. They are selling their lives, their stories, their ancestors' lives. Everyone gets to profit from it. What little you might know, what lot you might know. It's a space that people are not treated fairly once again. So while we're talking about reparations, we're not paying people to share their stories. There's something wrong there. There's a disconnect in terms of what we say we want to do and what we do every day. So we did this program. We have journals that will be coming out. We have videos that will be coming out, and it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful process. We're doing a second cohort, and we're having more kids. If any of you have kids that you think might want to participate, we welcome them to apply to the program. Another project that I've been working on recently was Ron and I, through Evanston Rules, partnered, as I said, with Northlight Theater, and we recorded all of these episodes of people talking about community hospital. We recorded these episodes of Carlos talking about his family's home being moved. And then when you think about that, think about the value of a house here versus the value of a house in the Fifth Ward. The Fifth Ward is a marvelous place. The Fifth Ward was an extraordinary space where we had Community Hospital, which closed in 1980, after being a place that Black people could go to be loved, to be looked at as though their pain meant something, to be healed in spaces that people thought, oh, they should go to Evanston Hospital, they should go to St. Francis Hospital. No, they should have been given the opportunity to go, but they should have been able to go to Community Hospital where they would have been respected and seen, where they would have been taken seriously. It reminds me of a story that Rose Johnson told about a teacher of mine, Jean Perry, and there was a kid who was always getting in trouble, young Black child, young boy getting in trouble. And we know that that happens to young Black boys far more than it happens to others, especially when they're educated by people who don't understand them. This young boy was always in the principal's office. and he talked to Jean Pierce. He said, "Why are you always in the principal's office? Stay out of the principal's office. You're always in trouble." And he said, "Well, she yells at me," and Jean Perry said, "Well, I yell at you too." And he said, "Yeah, but you like me." This is what we face everywhere, right? But I could go on and I ping and I pong because that's just who I am. So we're going to get used to that. But when I think of the Suttons moving into the Fifth Ward that has a lot of wonderful, but it also has a 13-year lifespan differential less than any other ward in the city. So we have to also look at the environment and what people are willing to leave in our backyards that they're not willing to have in their own. We've got waste management. We've got a bus company that has a lot of pollution. We've got above ground power, what do you call them? Power lines that make a difference. I'd be interested in knowing how many people have been affected by this, because it's not just trauma, which is huge. It's not just healthcare problems, which are huge. It is that we have put people in a space that is not safe, and we do it again and again. $25,000 will never be enough. Will never be enough. And then that we're questioned as to what we're going to do for it, that it's used for housing. That didn't happen to the Japanese. It didn't happen to the Jewish community. No one was asked to detail how they would spend their money. I think that speaks volumes. That 40 years later, 60 years later, we are being questioned for how we will spend this money. In the project that Ronnie and I did about community hospital, when we talked to all these people, we didn't just hear the pain. We heard we had everything we wanted. We had everything we wanted. And then many of those things were taken away with the school clothing, with the school closing, with the Y closing. Integration was not necessarily great from my perspective to many of our people, because there were many things that happened with that took away a community. When we recorded these episodes, we worked with a writer, with a directing playwright fellow at Northlight, a young man named Tor Campbell, who's awesome, who finished his year at Northlight, who is now at the Goodman doing great work. And Tor wrote some scenes, some monologues for actors. And one of the actors that he included was this extraordinary person here, Narissa Pearson, who's with us tonight to read again from the readings about community hospital and about the experiences.
The best view of Evanston is in your rearview mirror. That's what my grandfather always said. God rest his soul. And boy, was he right. You see, Evanston has a way of looking picture perfect on the surface. But once you dig a little deeper, the cracks start to show. And I'm not talking about the potholes on Church Street. No, I'm talking about the history, the soul of this place. My family has been here for generations, ever since my great-grandfather Elijah moved up from Nashville. They came looking for a better life, escaping the trauma of the South. My granddaddy used to say, "We traded cotton fields for cobblestones, but the chains just got invisible." He wasn't wrong. Back then, we couldn't even go to the main hospitals. Community Hospital of Evanston was our safe haven. It was the only place that would treat us like humans, and not just on Wednesdays when the white doctors were off playing golf. But let me tell you, Community Hospital was more than just a hospital. It was a lifeline. My Aunt Polly worked there as a nurse. Every day she'd come home, bake some cornbread, and tell stories of how Dr. Hill and Dr. Spencer saved lives with nothing but their sheer will and determination. the smell of cornbread baking in the oven would just fill the house, a scent so comforting that I still bake it to this day just to bring back those memories. And they had soul, and they had a Cadillac. Seriously, Dr. Spencer drove a cherry red caddy that was the envy of the entire neighborhood. I remember one summer, my baby brother Danny was sick, real sick. The kind of sick that makes your heart stop when the phone rings late at night. We couldn't even call an ambulance because they wouldn't take us. So we rushed him to community ourselves, and Dr. Hill was there just like always. She saved him. She saved so many of us. The kind of savior you don't forget. And in moments like those, you knew we were in the hands of angels. Now, when I look back at everything that's happened here, I see the change. The Black community isn't the heart of Evanston anymore. We've been pushed out, replaced, forgotten. But we built this town. We did. My Aunt Polly raised money for that hospital with fancy dinners and fundraisers that would put a North Shore celebration to shame. And the thing is, Evanston streets may look different, but the foundation, the spirit, it's still ours. There are not many things in life you can be sure of. Everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone will change. Yes, nothing and no one goes unchanged. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold. But that's the way of time. Nothing and no one goes unchanged. There are not many things in life you can be sure of, except the rain comes from the clouds, the sun lights up the sky, and hummingbirds do fly. Everything must change. You know?
That was beautiful.
You know, I drive past the old community hospital, and it's just a shell of what it used to be. But I can still hear the echoes of laughter, the cries of newborns, the voices of our ancestors. They whisper to me, reminding me of our strength, our resilience. They remind me that no matter how far I go, Evanston will always be a part of me. But still, the best view of Evanston it's in my rearview mirror. Because while I carry its lessons with me, I know my future lies ahead, not behind. And that's the bittersweet truth.
We're all amazing. Every one of you could be up here telling us your stories, and we'd all feel the same way. Women are extraordinary, and that's the whole, point of this event. So thank you to Fran and Meleika and to Lisa for creating this opportunity for us to share with each other. I'm really honored. I'd like to share a little bit about my journey as an integrative medicine physician. I've really always believed that to be a doctor is really to be inherently political. I don't think all physicians agree with me on that. But I think that, we're standing at this juncture, at this intersection of healthcare delivery, of healthcare access, of humanity itself, of ethics, of policy. As we heard Fran at the beginning, we are very directly affected by the policies that are changing in this country in terms of what we are able and unable to provide for patients who are coming to us for help right now. These are dire times. And it's vitally important we understand how these policies are affecting not just you as a patient, but our ability as physicians to take care of you in the way that we are best trained to do. So I do believe being a doctor is inherently political. And as such, I don't believe that after 25 years of practicing, that we can be healthy in an unjust society. We cannot be healthy in an unjust society. And this is really at the center of the work that I do. So, one of the questions for me has always been like, what is medicine? I love that word, medicine. Medicine means a lot to me. I grew up in an Indian household. I am first generation of Indian immigrants. We had all kinds of things that we called medicine growing up. But as my training continued, medicine more and more started to look like a handful of pills. Right? I ask some of my middle schoolers who I teach, who I'll tell you more about in a bit, when you guys think of the word medicine, what do you think of? And their hands are going up, shots, pills, taking my grandmother to the doctor. It's all around sickness. That's what they think about when they think of medicine. I think that's what most of us think about. But medicine has always been so much bigger than that. It's been love. Love is a medicine. This community is a medicine. I bet some of us came in here not feeling so hot tonight and are feeling different. That's a medicine. That's healing. Food is a medicine. Food is a medicine we take every day. Plants are a medicine. Dance is a medicine. Being playful is a medicine. These are all vital medicines that need to be at the forefront rather than at the very back of what we think about when we talk about community health. And so I've spent a lot of my career uplifting, in particular, food as a medicine. And I really focus on not just treating illnesses in my office, but also thinking about food as a very powerful tool for healing and creating systemic change, and changing the way that we view what health even really is. We all know that we're dealing with a sick care system right now, not a health care system. So things need to fundamentally change. Certainly from a systemic level, but also from a community and an individual level as well. How many of you have heard of integrative medicine before? All right, awesome. That's my Evanston. They know what integrative medicine's about. Some of you I've seen in my office, I believe. So in integrative medicine, we're really considering a whole health approach, a mind, body, spirit, community approach to healthcare. And to me, that also means addressing the structural inequities that exist not just in our healthcare system, but in our food systems as well, right? And we need to be ensuring that I'm very concerned that, many of my patients just don't have access to nutritious, healing foods. And that really, colors the way that I'm going to speak about food and nutrition when I know that there's not access available to all of the people I'm taking care of. So the heart of what I really do is really believing that food is a medicine and that we need to shift that idea of what that word medicine even really means. And of course, this is not my idea. This is an ancient way of believing. This is all the ancient medical traditions, all the indigenous cultures and traditional healing practices have embraced the idea that food is a medicine for centuries. Really, somewhere along the way, and this is a history I'll have to save for another day, because I know how it happened, but particularly in modern medicine, we have lost sight of this. And we've prioritized pharmaceuticals over food, over love, over community, over dance. We're treating symptoms. We're not treating root causes of dis-ease. So I think it's kind of perplexing in particular that we don't talk more about food in the doctor's office because we know the role that nutrition plays in chronic disease. We have a lot of data. We have 20, 30, 40 years of really good data showing that in chronic diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer, the things that are affecting most Americans, that they're at least partly preventable and partly manageable through dietary changes. So why aren't we talking about it more, right? And I feel like my role is to bring that back into the conversation, and make sure that we're not just medication managing and prescribing more medications at visits, but talking about how food is part of that plan to stay well, to treat whatever that person needs in that particular moment, and how important it is for that healing process to begin and to continue. So this might mean dietary changes to reduce inflammation, since inflammation is really at the core of all chronic disease. It might be improving gut health. It might be helping someone better regulate their blood sugar through food. It's really about treating the person, not the disease. It's about treating the whole person. So we've moved pretty far away from this understanding of food as medicine, despite that very clear connection between diet and health. And you won't believe this, but nutrition education has really been entirely absent from medical training. It's not that your doctors don't want to talk to you about it. We weren't trained to talk about it. I got 0 hours of nutrition education in my 8 years of medical training. And that was with a fellowship after that. I had to go back and do the training on my own, get an integrative medicine fellowship that took a couple years, a few other certificates, a lot of self-study. I had to unlearn and relearn and retrain to get to this place. And, we're often left unequipped to guide patients in using nutrition for prevention and healing. And there's a lot to do in a 15-minute visit, right? You guys you feel that. You feel that urgency. I've got that list of things I have to cover with my doctor. Are we going to get through it? There's hardly any space to talk about food. So this absence of nutrition education isn't just a gap in medical education. It's a real failure of our healthcare system to recognize the profound impact that food can have on health. And it's particularly harmful to communities that are already suffering from healthcare disparities and from food insecurity. So one way that I'm working to address this gap is through a field called culinary medicine. Anyone heard of that one, culinary medicine? A few less hands, but some of you, great. So culinary medicine is a field, again, it's interesting, we always have to give names to the new fields, right? Like this is ancient stuff. This is food and medicine. We call it culinary medicine. It is a field that is growing exponentially, I'm happy to say, that combines evidence-based nutrition with the art of cooking with the aim to prevent and treat chronic disease. So this is fantastic, right? And it's not just doctors, it's doctors and chefs, one of whom is here in the audience, Chef Q. Chef Q, who I have been so privileged to get to work with in Chicago Public Schools. It is a pleasure to be back in the same room with you. So these programs, the first program I'm going to tell you about, this culinary medicine program that we run out of the Pritzker School of Medicine at University of Chicago down in Hyde Park, we're training future physicians not just to understand the science of nutrition, which they aren't getting in other areas, but how to apply that in practical, real-world settings with patients, right? And this is an idea that felt innovative and creative to me that I really wanted to put into action, and I had a companion doctor, Dr. Sonia Oyola, who was also interested, and together we put this program together. Thank you. So we teach medical students how to cook simple, nutritious meals along with a chef in a teaching kitchen. We show them how different foods impact different kinds of chronic diseases and help them understand also the cultural and emotional importance of food, right, in people's lives. It is deeply, deeply personal to talk to people about their food. You can't just be like, hey, here's a recipe for a, caprese salad, go at it. That may not be something anyone's ever eaten before or has no desire to eat. And it's very colonial and very Western medicine to sort of say, hey, here's a book of recipes, like this should help, right? And that was exactly what I did not want to do, is replicate a colonial framework for communities that are already vulnerable because of food insecurity. So we teach the medical students, about the cultural relevance of food, about the emotionality about talking about food with patients, meeting people where they're at, and then empowering these medical students to prescribe nutrition and feel just as comfortable prescribing food as they do in prescribing medications, which have a lot more side effects, and how to tailor those needs to the patient. So through this kind of approach, we're helping to shift the narrative around this. And we're teaching that these medical students that food's not an afterthought that you squeeze in at the end or just a luxury approach. It's a fundamental part of healthcare. It has to be in the conversation. And we've seen this really grow and impact the healthcare practices of our students. In the 9 years since we started this program, this field was just starting out as a small seed. We have graduated over 500 medical students at University of Chicago who are all out there doing all kinds of good work in all fields. We've got surgeons and anesthesiologists and family docs and OB-GYNs who are all out there who got some training from a chef in a teaching kitchen and some doctors who care about food as medicine. And so things are changing, and they're changing in a good way. We have about 80 academic health centers in the country that teach culinary medicine in medical school as an embedded part of medical school. So this is a tremendous shift in the last few years. And you're gonna find these younger doctors, they're smart, they know what's up, and they have a whole bunch of ways that they get information that I did not get. So I'm really excited, and I'm always very optimistic when I'm at the medical school working with them. So, so that's one of the programs that I wanted to share with you. But, food as medicine it's not just about individual health. It's really, again, about addressing systemic issues and what I referred to as food justice. And in many communities, particularly in communities of color here in Chicago, access to healthy, affordable food is very limited. And this is not an accident. This is the result of food apartheid, or the systemic inequities that have created systems in which we have mostly industrialized processed food that are prioritizing profit over people's well-being. I don't use the term food desert because a desert is a naturally occurring place in a normal natural ecosystem. These are not food deserts. These are vibrant communities. They're not desolate. They're not barren. The reason there's not food access in those communities is because of systemic inequities and systemic racism. And unless we call it what it is, we can't change it. So I was like, after working with the med students, I was like, wow, these guys are great, and they're learning so much, and they're so, they're transforming healthcare. They're mostly in their mid-20s and some older. And for many of them, they're like, this is the first time I've ever learned anything about nutrition ever in my whole life. And I was like, we need to be learning about this way earlier than medical school, right? This should be like kind of grade school stuff, if not earlier. And I trained a little bit in Cuba, and let me tell you, Cuba is on it. They train their little tiny babies about breastfeeding and good nutrition from the very beginning. They have an excellent public health system there. And I've learned so much from them in the time I spent in Cuba. So I decided to move this program, this culinary medicine idea, and sort of bring it into middle school. And I thought middle school is kind of that moment, right, where kids are like old enough to handle a knife, but young enough to be like still kind of listening to their teachers kind of and parents, and like also starting to make decisions about their food, right? They're starting to make their own decisions about what they're eating. And so that felt like the right sort of space to maybe try this. And so I collaborated with Chicago Public Schools and started a class called Food is Power. It used to be called Food is Medicine, but as I told you, kids think medicine are pills, so I thought that wasn't probably a good name, so I changed it to Food is Power. And really the idea isn't to say eat this and don't eat that. It's to say learn about food and then make powerful decisions for yourself. I never tell kids don't eat Takis and don't drink, red Gatorade and don't have ice cream. That's not my job. But my job is to say, learn about why Takis are red. That's red food dye. There's a difference between red food dye and naturally occurring red foods. And guess what? Red food dye can make you feel really irritable and really unfocused. Has anyone ever experienced that? And then kids are like, I've got some information. Maybe they keep eating the Takis, maybe they don't. But they have the information, and that's the power, right? Who are we to keep the knowledge about how to eat from communities that don't have access? People are like, why are you talking about all those foods? They can't buy that at the grocery store. Well, that's not for me to decide. That is for the community to decide the choices that they are going to make. However, all of the recipes that we teach in CPS are affordable. They're made from simple ingredients that are available in most communities. I'm not asking people to go out and find, quinoa or some specific type of kale. It's about what is culturally appropriate to your community. What do you enjoy eating? What is simple and enjoyable and delicious for you? And those are the kinds of recipes that we make. So we're learning about food. We're learning about how to cook. We're learning about the roots of food and the routes of food. How did cabbage get here in the first place? Cabbage is not even indigenous to North America, right? So the stories of how did cabbage become part of the Englewood community's staple food? How does cabbage even grow here? Well, it actually came from Asia. How did it get from Asia to Africa to here? We talk about that. So all of this, to me, really challenges the dominance of a globalized food industry by giving kids this kind of information. And over the 9 years that we've been teaching there, and it's just, we're just in a classroom. It's a pop-up teaching kitchen. Most CPS schools do not have a functioning cooking kitchen. They have a warming kitchen. So we just pop up in the classroom or pop up in the lunchroom and bring all the supplies in, all the chef's knives and the cutting boards and all the ingredients. And we get some time together to just have a great time. And they teach us and we teach them. And it is a collaborative environment. Now, Englewood is a neighborhood where I predominantly teach. And people talk about Englewood. Isn't that scary when you go down to Englewood? Where do you park? Do you lock your car? Let me tell you, Englewood is a vibrant, beautiful, wonderful neighborhood just like Evanston is. There are a lot of issues that their neighborhood faces around vulnerability in terms of not having good access to health care, not having the kind of same food access that we have in other parts of the city, increased rates of chronic disease, especially for kids, and increased rates of poverty. But that's not the story of Englewood, right? And that's not how the kids see Englewood. That's their home, that's their community. And I'm very respectful of the fact that I am not from Englewood. I am driving a long way to get over there to teach, and I'm going to learn from them. And that is what cultural relevance around teaching around nutrition and health is really all about. So I share these ideas with you so that I can just point out that if you have an idea, a tiny seed of an idea, a small creative idea, it's really important that you act on it. I mean, this was something, this is not a big program, okay? It's not a big program. We'd like to scale it. If you'd like to support it, there's some information on the lower level on how to do that. But I do think that change depends on each of us acting on our creative ideas. And I do think that it's always been a small group of committed citizens. that has made a difference. I'm getting choked up because I'm thinking about all of you who I've just spoken after, and how each of us have done something extraordinary that's really ordinary, which is just acting on an idea that you have. So I think it's through the action that we give life to our visions. And when I began my journey in medicine, if you told me I would be teaching, I would have a chef hat on and an apron and be washing dishes in CPS kitchens, I'd be like, that's not my vision for what I'm going to be doing with my medical career. But this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with my medical career. And, you know, I see a gap and there's a missing piece, and then I want to take action. And I think if we all find those little gaps in whatever it is that we're doing, whatever your sphere of influence is, you see that gap, you take one small action, it can really profoundly change a community. And I think it's one of the main ways that we can make change. So that's all I wanted to share with you all tonight. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share. And if you want to hear more about these programs, I'd love to tell you more.
I feel very, very honored to be part of this event. I hope you're enjoying yourselves as much as I am. The ladies in this lineup are an inspiring bunch for sure. Thank you for giving me a few moments to join in. I want to talk with you about my complete addiction to volunteering. First, I should explain that I have some other things in my life as well. I'm raising a high schooler and a middle schooler, and I work full-time. I worked as a professional writer and editor for about 15 years before I opened my own business. That business, Creative Co-working, has been open almost 14 years now and has expanded to 3 locations. What's fun about my co-working spaces is that they double as venues in which to showcase local talent. My Evanston and Westtown locations display work by local artists like the magnificent Fran Joy, who you heard from earlier, and please buy her art that's here. It's gorgeous, and if you don't buy it, I'll have to, and I'm running out of walls. And my Edgewater location at the historic Colvin House doubles as a concert venue for local musicians every Tuesday night. So I get to have some fun, and I meet inspiring creative people all the time. Colvin House itself was a creative project. It's a mansion designed by architect George Mayer, designated as a Chicago landmark, but it was in terrible shape when I found it. It had fallen into disrepair after its roof had been leaking for at least 10 years, so it was a bit of a fixer-upper, shall we say. But from the moment I saw it, I could see its former splendor and its future potential. I have invested many years now, and more dollars than I'd like to count, restoring it and shaping it into a space that our members and visitors really appreciate. The work that I do can be very fulfilling, and I feel lucky to have found work that I enjoy. But I have found over the years that no matter how much I like my job and my family life, I like to have an additional outlet for my energy and talents. I've found volunteer work to fill that gap for me, and now I'm addicted. In high school, I volunteered through the Key Club and the Amnesty International Club. In college, I worked in a writing center assisting immigrant students for whom English was a second language. And in graduate school, I volunteered for an Evanston organization called Literature for All of Us, helping at-risk youth see that their words matter and that books and writing can enrich one's life. In recent years, I've had my hands in a few things around town. I was on the board of the Evanston Chamber of Commerce for 6 years, serving as president in 2019, and I'm currently board president for Downtown Evanston, the organization that oversees the marketing, programming, and upkeep of our central business district. Both of these volunteer roles have given me an opportunity to advocate for local business owners like myself, to anticipate challenges business owners might face and try to address them, and to applaud the successes of our business community along the way. I've also been involved with the Women's Club of Evanston since 2012. I've been on their board the last couple of years, and this year it is my privilege to be the club president. Thank you. If you're not familiar with the Women's Club, let me just say that there's something for everyone there, and I'm addicted, for sure. What I love most is that it provides me with one-stop shopping for all the types of volunteer work my little heart desires. I can volunteer for a shift at the soup kitchen one Saturday. Then I can volunteer for District 65's ESCA program, giving free clothes to any kids who need them. I can help plan a fundraiser for an amazing organization like Shorefront. I can even sing and dance in a variety show to support Northlight Theater, all in 1 year. Do you see why I'm addicted? Now, I do understand that if you're not self-employed, as I am, you might not have as much control over your weekly schedule as I do to carve out time for volunteering. I have a very accommodating boss. However, imagine if every person in this room volunteered just 1 hour for a Red Cross blood drive, or 1 hour helping their neighbors register to vote. As Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Not all of us are trailblazers or comfortable in the spotlight, but we also need people at the sides of the trail tending the path to be sure the progress continues. That's where I see myself most of the time. I'm just doing my part here and there, where I can, to keep things moving in a positive direction. And after I've helped one organization for a little while or a few years, I start looking for where else I might be able to support someone's good work. What I'm hoping is that something you've heard tonight will light a spark for you. That maybe you have an interest in volunteering a little of your time, that maybe you just needed a nudge, and this is it. Imagine how much those of us in this room could collectively strengthen our community. Imagine how much joy we could spread. And imagine how much fun we could have together along the way. Who knows, you just might become addicted. I'd like to close with a poem that I wrote for this occasion. It's called The Divide. Women will heal this nation. We will bridge the divide. We will reach for one another like trees on opposite sides of a street, stretch their branches across in hopes of connection. Yes, women with outstretched arms will heal this nation. Sorry. We, in this room, we will bridge the divide. I feel it, and so do you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Good evening to everyone. Thank you all for sticking around. I definitely want to give a big thank you to Fran Joy, Mom, and and to Lisa D. This was a necessary event, and the key word is necessary, because there are people in this world that needed to hear the words that have been spoken on this stage today. Absolutely. So thank you, and looking forward to the next one, to the next round of women that will speak on this stage. So thank you, thank you. Definitely want to say thank you to Steve Rogers. I think he's gone. He's gone. But I've recorded a couple episodes here. He's always opening this space up to the community, so I just wanted to give him another thank you. He is just absolutely amazing. When you hear the history of this property here, and then he gives away everything for free. I don't even know how he makes money on this place. Like, did you hear, like, he didn't charge anything to anybody? And then a thank you to Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. When I started Evanston Live TV back in 2015, she was one of the first officials to allow me to interview her. She didn't know me, but she loved the thought of engaging the community. And she's always answering the call, so she's helped me to launch the new platform that I have. And then I reached out to her to come join us today, and she's always answering the call. So thank you to Jan Schakowsky. I'm sure she's going to see the video, so I just want her to know I thank you. Thank you so much. And to all the ladies who have come before me on this stage, much respect, Much, much respect to you. I feel honored to share this stage with you all tonight, so thank you so much. So tonight, I want to leave you with a call to action. If anyone looks at my program, my platform, that's what I'm about. Has anyone watched Evanston Live TV and Where the People Meet? And okay, so I want to leave you with a call to action. My story is just a backdrop, but what's most important is what we do from here together. So everyone in this room is in a different field, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, healthcare, government, arts and entertainment. But one thing that we all have in common in those different fields is that we encounter a system. And sometimes that system can be in our favor, and then sometimes that system is like boxing a mountain. Absolutely. So we look at like what's happening in the news right now. We hear the story of Sean Combs, Diddy. How many people have heard that story? We hear the updates like every day, right? That was a system. So here you have this man that was being accused, allegedly, of abusing young women and young men. Corruption, money laundering, all of these things. And then when you watch the news and you listen to the talk shows and you're reading the blogs, what's the one question that always pops up in all of it when they talk about Diddy? Why didn't anyone say anything? From 1990 to present day, nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. But the truth is, people were speaking, but the system silenced them. The system silenced them. And there's a system that exists in everything that we do, every field that we are in. Some of us have had to learn early about systems. I learned at 9 years old, and you'll think back to the time when you first encountered a system. Mine was 9 years old when my father was violently murdered, and my stepfather was murdered 2 years later after that. No justice in either of them. And my grandmother, my father's mother, had to sit me down because they let his killer go. The grand jury in downstate Illinois let his killer go. And Mama Vita, God rest her soul, she never sugarcoated anything. She wanted to just tell me straight up, this is the world that you live in at 9 years old. She said, it's a system. The system silenced the witness who saw the murder, and the system controlled the grand jury because they didn't value your father's life. He's a black man. They could care less. That's just one less black man in the world. They didn't care. So she let me know there's a system in place. So I learned early at 9 years old. And all I thought at that time at 9 was, I want to fight. I want to fight. Fast forward to me being 19 years old. I started to think the world was just, okay, maybe I'm a little too cynical, let me open up. So I'm at Columbia College, doing what I love. My passion was dancing and the entertainment industry and theater. And I just felt like the world was opening up, like there was so much hope, and I was just excited. I was young, and yes, I'm ready to take on the world. And then a friend of mine named Nikki Foster, born and raised here in Evanston, she was a singer. She said, let's go to Atlanta, Georgia. It's the new Motown back in the early 90s. It was the new progressive city. Everybody was flocking to Atlanta, especially if you wanted to be in the music industry. So I said, okay, let's go. We both dropped out of college. I know my mom was not happy about that. But I wanted to go on this adventure. I was like, college will always be there. Let's go see what this is about. And we get there, and we're having the time of our life. We're broke as heck, but we're loving it. The industry, meeting lots of people. We met a young producer that some may know now named Dallas Austin, and he introduced us to some people at LaFace Records that was just opening in Atlanta. They hadn't even released their first artist yet. So L.A. Reid and Babyface opened this record company. So I was asked to audition as a dancer to go on tour. So I'm like, oh my God, the world is beautiful, life is grand. So I landed the audition, got the part, things started moving very, very fast. on the road, traveling with artists that I grew up and respected, and then the system hit, the reality of the industry, and it hit hard, and I was 19, 20 years old. So this high-level executive, VP at LaFace Records, started being very persistent and putting the pressure on me to do things that I didn't want to do. So I knew I only had a few more no's to tell him that I wasn't down with the get down. And I had confided in an artist, a singer there named Dia Dame. She was in her 30s. I was 19, 20, so I thought she was old. She was in her 30s, so she was like a mother figure, I thought, at the time. But I didn't put myself in her shoes. So when I confided in her what was happening, she just looked at me, she just listened, but she didn't do anything. She didn't say anything, she just kind of walked away. And then I had been on the road for them for a while, and then maybe a few days after that, I got the call that I was let go. That I was let go. And no explanation. That VP called me and said, well, you made your choice, now live with it. So I was like, okay. So there I was, unemployed, my dream, the party was over. Then a few months later, Dia Dame had been desperately trying to get in touch with me, and she wanted to apologize for not protecting me. And she tried to explain the system to me. She was like, this is a game, and if you don't play the game, you're out. So she was trying to explain, and me being that young, I didn't understand what she was going through as a young artist with her first record deal. So she was probably going through much worse than I was. And that conversation haunts me to this day because she was killed not long after that, and it was a mystery around her death. But she tried to explain the system. So this is the second time I'm hearing about a system in place. But she had respect that I came to tell her because I wanted to do something about it. And she pretty much was like, don't let that spirit in you die. So fast forward, I started going into corporate America, working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry and outside the entertainment industry. And I started seeing that system again, whether it was pay, discrimination, and I always had the need to say something. I just couldn't sit there. I don't know if it was the 9-year-old in me, I don't know, but I could never say anything. So needless to say, I went from job to job to job every time I saw something that was not right. And I had a friend in LA, she was an entertainment attorney, and she would counsel me through all of these jobs. And she was like, you know what, Meleika, you have a pattern. You have a pattern going on here. She was like, you know, you go in and you fight for a raise, not for yourself. You go in and fight for the pay increase for your entire department. You go in and fight for the policy changes to make things fair for everyone. She was like, the system don't like that. The system does not like that. You're gonna keep losing jobs if you don't learn to work with the system. And I said, I don't know, well, maybe that's just who I am. I can't change. And then I started working for Norman Lear in LA. I worked there for a few years, and there were a lot of things going on at Concord Music Group, a record label that he had started. It was a hobby of his, and God rest Norman Lear's. So I did have some positive interactions with him, but when you looked at the system of the industry, there weren't many black employees that worked at this company, and it was a jazz soul label, so you would have thought it'd be more of us, but it was like a handful of us that worked there. So, you know, we would go to lunch and talk about, you know, complain about the policies and our pay and things like that. And then one of the older black employees, he said, look here, Angela Davis, you can't be coming up in here making waves. He was like, you need to put your head down and make this money and act like you don't see nothing. Just put your head down and go to work and get paid. and don't say anything. Get your rent paid. And I'm looking at him like, I can't do that. I can't do that. Fast forward, back to Evanston. Well, before I got back to Evanston, I started marching. Trayvon Martin was one of the first situations where I wanted to really get involved, and I started marching, and I wanted to really get involved in the community. And I came back here to Evanston, and I thought, okay, I want to do something totally dealing with the community, engaging the community. What can I do? I bought a little GoPro camera back in 2015, put it on the windshield of my car, and I started putting candidates in my car and driving them around so they could tell us what their vision was for this city. So I had Haggerty in the car. I had like everybody in my car, right? Like, tell us what you want to do. And it helped to increase the voter turnout because people were able to see another side to these people that were running for office because they forgot the camera was there. This is a little camera on the windshield. So they really opened up about what they loved about Evanston, what they didn't like about Evanston, what they had plans for Evanston. And I loved it. And I you know, Evanston Live TV wasn't the main reason that the voter turnout had increased, but I appreciate that they acknowledged that it helped. So I said, okay, I need to do more. I need to do more. So, you know, going around getting the stories and everything, but there's a system here too in Evanston. So what are we going to do about that system? So then I joined the board of We Will Women. I don't know if anyone in here had heard of that organization. It was an organization that helped women and children get involved in legislation. So I never thought that anyone in this room could help author legislation. Does anyone know that you can write some legislation with a city official? Did you know that? Yeah, I did not know that. So I got on that board, and Alexandra Eidenberg asked me, well, what do you want to do? She was the president of the organization. What do you want to do here? And I said, I want to do something for education, for Black history. I want to add pre-enslavement to Black history. She was like, okay, well, let's find out which state representative has a Black history bill and see if you can amend it. And it was just like that. I reached out to State Representative LaShawn K. Ford, asked him if I could amend his bill to add pre-enslavement to show who Black people were prior to being enslaved, all of our contributions, us building kingdoms and contributing to medicine and science. I felt like the entire state of kids should know that about Black people, that that's our history. And he loved it. He loved it. He said, yeah, let's do it. And so it took work and it took fight, and we went up against a system. And you would have thought the system was just Republicans, because definitely we were getting the death threats and everything. It was very scary. But it was also some Democrats behind the scene that did not want. They did not want it. And I was heartbroken and shattered because there were people even in my organization that were working with some city officials, even in this town, who didn't want to sponsor the bill, and they were working against it. It was a whole system that I didn't even know existed in terms of politics and how ordinance and bills are made. It was a beast. But we fought and we kept going. And then Rep. Ford said, what do you want to do now? And I said, let's do a bill where we include everyone. We want the history of women who helped to build this country. Kids need to learn that. The Native community, absolutely. The Latino community, the children need to know everyone who helped to build this country. And he said, well, what do you want to call that bill? And I said, the Inclusive American History Bill. And so we went to battle, went to fight again. More death threats, more issues, more finding out who didn't have our back. And I thought that they were our friends. I thought that they were our partners. That politics is something very, very tricky. But Rep. Ford added it to the Black Caucus agenda, and J.B. Pritzker signed off on it, and it passed in March of 2021. Yes. So now today, I'm thinking, there's a lot going on in Evanston. So I did some state, now I want to do some local right here. I had watched a city council meeting back during the pandemic, and I had watched Alderperson Tom Suffredin. He was fighting the system. I don't know what people feel about Alderperson Tom Suffredin, but that man believes in the people. He fights for the people. And I watched him tell the rest of the council, do not raise the residents' property taxes, especially during a pandemic. They would not listen. They were pretty much just, you know how the council, who here watches the Evanston council meetings? You know how it goes, right? And he just was fighting. He was like, we're smart people. We're creative. We can find another way. Let's not tax the Evanston residents more, especially right now. And he lost that fight. But that stuck with me. That conversation stuck with me. So then, now they have the Envision 2045. They got all these other things going on. Mayor Biss is talking about, let's be bold, let's be creative with housing. There's not enough housing. All right. So I'm like, okay, well, here's a thought. Why don't we freeze the property? Why don't we start somewhere? Why don't we freeze the property tax for people over a certain age, over the age of 65? Yes, you get behind that? Yes. So I've been working with Alderperson Claire Kelly, who has been fighting the system as well beyond, I don't even think some of you even know what Alderperson Claire Kelly has been doing for the people, but she has been fighting especially to keep businesses downtown Evanston and to, stop the increase on their rent and the property taxes with the businesses. So I told her, the idea for the residents, for long-time term residents over the age of 65 and freezing their property taxes. And it's a lot more details to it. And I've been working with Jackson Poller. He's the assistant counselor to the speaker for the state. So he's helping me to draft this. And so we will be presenting this. So hopefully the system won't kill it at Evanston City Council, but I think we need to start it somewhere with the property taxes for those who have been here for a long time and have really poured into this community, and too many people are being priced out. And I know people focus on the Black community being priced out, but it's a lot of people, white people too, who cannot afford to keep their property, and their children can't afford it. So I'm gonna wrap here. I know Lisa's like, girl. So that's my call to action to you today, is to reach out to your alderperson, ask them what would they think about this when it's presented to them, and you can find out which aldermen are for increasing your property taxes and which ones are for trying to keep you here and where you can afford to live here. So the system is here in Evanston too. It exists everywhere, and it exists right here. So whether we're talking about housing, education, property taxes, the systems fight back, but we can fight the system. And I think we can do it. We can't do it alone. It's power in numbers. We can do it. So today I ask you, what will you stand for? Don't wait for the system to hit your door personally. Don't wait until it's too late. Take a stand, speak out, and push back. Thank you.